When friends gathered at a wedding, what was supposed to be a beautiful day turned into horror as terrifying apocalyptic events occurred, which compelled the remaining to reevaluate their lives and all the choices they had made. The movie begins with a montage of videos depicting all the happy moments of a group of friends. In the present day, Tommy was filming everyone for their friends, Skylar and Dan's wedding. Tommy captured every single thing, moments of them joking around during the preparation, the vows, the tears of the bride and groom, happy and proud smiles on everyone's faces as they watched their friends tie the knot, and the excitement during the reception. At one point, another couple, Allison and Jack, who were best friends with the newly married couple, got into a small argument which led Allison to walk out. Jack decided to let her be for a while so as not to ruin the mood of the celebration. Tommy, on the other hand, followed Skylar's parents into the elevator, filming a wholesome moment between the old couple. The three of them were all smiling until they heard a strange noise and the elevator acting up. Next thing Tommy knew, the older couple had collapsed on the ground with their eyes wide open, dead. He screamed for help as soon as the elevator doors opened, but realized that the same thing had happened to a large number of people all over the world. The group of friends gathered together and ran to safety along with everyone else, not having any clue of what was happening. After a strange lighting outage, the group went out to find somewhere safer to stay when they were startled by something dropping on the ground. When Tommy checked what it was, he realized that it was a huge piece of solid ice, and as if on cue, it started raining solid ice. They took refuge in a store where Skylar desperately looked for a Bible, remembering that they had been taught about the resurrection during a church service. After reading a few verses, Skylar was panicking and wondering why she was left behind when she did everything right. The others, though they did not believe what she said, decided to just comfort her. They proceeded to leave the store to go looking for Allison, who had left before the apocalyptic events. Jack wanted to go to 45 North, believing that she was there, but both Tommy and Skylar insisted on going to the church as it was the place Allison always goes to after fighting with Jack. The group, along with a girl named Sam who tagged along, went to the church. It was eerily quiet as they walked through the darkness and destruction when they heard a shrill trumpeting followed by an explosion. Then they heard the sound of fluttering wings and something suddenly grabbed Skylar. When they found her, whatever creature had grabbed her had already dropped her on the ground. Dan carried his wife, and they rushed to the church where they were led in by a pastor named Shay. Skylar was brought to another room to get treated while Jack and Tommy reunited with Allison. Dan pulled Skylar into an embrace to comfort her as a woman named Rachel tended to Skylar's wounds. Dan tried to distract his wife as much as possible to make things a little better for Scylla, who was sobbing in pain. Meanwhile, Tommy talked to Pastor Shay, who, just like Skylar, believed that the second coming had begun and the children of God had been raptured. Those who dropped dead were believers, and they were taken to heaven by God to save them from the tribulation that would take place all over the world. Those who got left behind are the non-believers who weren't blessed with the gift of salvation. Pastor Shay stated that they were all presented with the same evidence that everything that was written in the Bible so many years ago is now happening. It just depends on the conclusion one wishes to draw from it. When Pastor Shay asked Tommy what he thought attacked Skylar, Tommy answered aliens, which caused Pastor Shay to laugh and say that soon they'd find out exactly what those unseen creatures were outside. New survivors came in, and one of them was a pregnant lady who was already in labor. The mother asked to hold her son and cried when she realized that her baby boy was gone. Tommy went to talk to Pastor Shay, who seemed to already know that the baby was going to be stillborn. Pastor Shay explained that it was because the baby was innocent and free of sin. Tommy wondered why God killed all the innocent people and children, but Pastor Shay disagreed. God didn't kill them, he took their souls and brought them to heaven where they could have eternal bliss, leaving their mortal bodies behind. Pastor Shay told Tommy that he heard the sound of a trumpet and instantly knew that the time had come. Tommy then asked why Pastor Shay wasn't taken when he believes in God. Pastor Shay explained that just because he was a pastor does not mean that he deserved the salvation God had gifted him. He only had comfort. He didn't have a relationship with God. He failed himself by not being true and only serving God for the comfort he received. Later on, everyone heard a pounding of the door and the screams of a man begging to be let go before those screams of help turned into screams of fear and pain. The sound of the screeching of an unknown creature followed the man's screams, and everyone listened in fear as the creature tried breaking through the church, only leaving when it realized it couldn't. The survivors inside the church watched news about the sudden, instant death that took the lives of millions of people worldwide, all children and infants, and random segments of the adult population. They watched random clips showing instant death. Following this is the news about the unusual weather patterns, a group of animals randomly dying, and those remaining seemingly in frenzy. Slowly, the group of friends is beginning to open their eyes and see the truth in the Bible. Inside a room, Tommy, Allison, and Jack were watching the video Tommy managed to take when Skylar was attacked by the creature when Pastor Shay joined them. The pastor explained what was written in Revelations 9 while they continued watching the video, slowing it down to see what the creature looked like. In Revelations 9, the fifth angel sounded his trumpet and opened the abyss. The sun and sky were darkened, and locusts fell upon the earth. hair like a woman's and teeth like the lion's teeth. The fluttering of wings sounds like the thundering of many horses rushing into battle. They have stingers like a scorpion's, and they use them to torment people. The trio listened as everything Pastor Shay was saying was revealed to be the truth as they saw the face of the creature. Jack asked what it was, and Pastor Shay explained that it was one of the fallen who were meant to roam the earth and torment the remaining. The trio was horrified upon learning that this is just the beginning and that things are only going to get worse. Skylar, on the other hand, was becoming more and more distressed due to the overwhelming fear and pain she was feeling. Rachel pulled Dan away and told him that Skylar's wounds were getting infected and she didn't have an antibiotic to help her. She informed Dan about the sample packets of amoxicillin left in her car, and Dan volunteered to get them, along with Tommy and Jack. But Dan and Tommy made Jack stay behind before the two of them stepped out of the church. They were hurrying to look for Rachel's car when another car's alarm was triggered by a man who was oddly calm despite everything that was going on. The duo walked past him and went straight to Rachel's car, taking a duffel bag and rummaging through it to find the sample packets of amoxicillin. Dan found it and they were about to go back to the church when something hit the front of the car. They hid inside the car and waited in silence until one of the fallen attacked the car. The duo stayed put while the fallen were desperately trying to get to them when the strange man from earlier approached the creature, declaring that the power of God would compel the fallen. The fallen attacked the man, and Dan and Tommy took their only chance to run back to the church while the fallen were busy with the man. Jack saw them approaching and opened the door to let them in before immediately closing it. Rachel took the sample packets of amoxicillin and went back to Skylar. That night, while the group was trying to rest, Tommy was still filming. When Jack claimed that he loves Allison, Tommy seemed to be in disbelief as he remembered all the times Allison came to him, pouring her heart out about Jack, who couldn't even love her properly. Jack and Tommy got into an argument that compelled Tommy to admit that he was in love with Allison too. Following Tommy's confession of love for someone else's girlfriend, Dan also made a confession that he had cheated on Skylar before they got married. After the sudden confessions, the group decided to call it a night, and Dan returned to Skylar. The next day, Rachel checked on Skylar's wounds and told Dan that she couldn't do anything for Skylar anymore. The wound is still worsening, and Rachel doesn't think Skylar will last long before she succumbs to her wounds. Since the wound was spreading like venom, they need an anti-venom, which could be found only in the hospital, and an actual doctor that can help Skylar. Dan decided that he would go to the hospital as soon as the sun came up. Tommy then visited Pastor Shay in his room and found him praying. Tommy asked if he would still be raptured if he ever made it out of this mess. The pastor told him that rapture was done and the path back to God would be hard. It's up to Tommy to make a choice. Pastor Shay then went to the sanctuary where everyone was already waiting, and for the first time ever, he became a true pastor. Everyone listened as he preached about God and the path they had to take to receive God's salvation. That path will be filled with pain and suffering, but at the end of the path is an eternal life in heaven. He encouraged the people to go and take the journey back to God. As if he heard the name of God falling out of the pastor's lips, the fallen became a lot more aggressive and began trying to destroy the church. The church can no longer hold it, so Pastor Shay told everyone to go to the basement. Everyone screamed in fear as they raced to the basement and closed the door behind them. They hear the fallen banging around to get to them, and then Rachel screams. They opened the door to let Rachel in, but it was too late as the fallen had pulled her back. Pastor Shay apologized, telling everyone that the fallen was there for her as he was the bridge that would lead them back to God. There was only one way out, and Pastor Shay made up his mind to sacrifice himself. He opened the door, and the fallen immediately took him. The next day, they didn't hear the sound of the fallen anymore and decided to get out of the basement and out of the church. Dan carried Skylar as the group went to the hospital and noticed people leaving the building. They saw a nurse guiding an injured woman out of the hospital and asked for her help, but the nurse disagreed as they were going to the relief center on the riverfront bridge. But Skylar didn't have that much time anymore. Dan, Sam, and Allison stayed with Skylar while Tommy and Jack went deeper into the hospital to search for anything Skylar might need. Then Allison heard a screeching sound somewhere in the hospital, and when she looked at the dark hallway, she noticed a quick movement. Tommy and Jack heard the same thing. They checked where the sound was coming from, but it was only a dead body falling down. Meanwhile, Dan was softly speaking to Skylar. The two of them spoke of their love for each other before Skylar took her last breath. They cried, mourning for Skylar. Instead of crying the whole time, Allison sat beside her and prayed to God. But Dan hated this. He couldn't understand why they had to pray to a God who took Skylar from them. He went outside and screamed at the skies, screaming how much he hated God. Tommy and Jack saw it, and they panicked when a fallen man killed Dan. Allison, on the other hand, got Sam to film her as she told whoever that they didn't have much time left on Earth and they had to make a decision. The lights in the room behind Allison flickered, and Sam gasped in fear when she saw the shadow of a fallen. Tommy and Jack hurried to get back to Skylar, and Tommy grieved when he realized that she had passed away. They continued searching for both Sam and Allison when Tommy saw Sam's phone on the ground. He opened it and watched the video of what happened. Sam and Allison were running away before the phone fell to the ground and Allison was seen being taken away by the fallen. Jack came back and noticed Tommy staring somewhere, and when he turned to look, he saw dead Allison and ran to embrace her. Sam came out of her hiding and Tommy comforted her. Tommy approached Jack and told him that they should go, but Jack refused, not wanting to leave Allison. When Tommy said that he was going to stay too, Jack calmed down and finally agreed to leave. They arrived at the riverfront bridge where there was a military camp and stood by the fire while watching Allison's last video. Allison talked about how she finally found real faith amidst the chaos. She knew the demons were there to remove the word of God and they had to make a choice. Do they want to suffer by following God's path and be saved, or let the demons that now roam the earth take away the only chance they had left? Later on, Tommy realized that the fallen are drawn to faith and that is why they had been chasing them. Tommy hurriedly looked for Jack, who had decided to have the same faith as Allison did. When they found him, the fallen had already killed him. Sam then told Tommy that Jack and Allison had already made the decision when they chose to trust God. The pain they had to go through was a part of it, and no matter how painful it was still the right choice. Tommy watched as Sam walked through the running scarecrows. She had made a decision, and she chose to have faith in God. Tommy looked up at the skies and saw too many fallen trees coming down at once. They were coming straight for him, and that was because, deep inside, Tommy had already made a choice.